I'm Georgia, 31 years old, and I never thought my own parents would ambush me with an ultimatum that would destroy everything I'd worked for. Sitting in their marble-floored living room, watching my father slide a document across the coffee table while my pregnant sister Madison smirked behind her teacup, I realized this wasn't a family dinner, it was a carefully orchestrated trap designed to turn me into Madison's personal servant. Before we dive into how my family tried to sabotage my entire future, let me ask, where are you watching from today? If you've ever dealt with toxic family dynamics or manipulation from those who should love you unconditionally, hit that like button and subscribe to hear how I turned their twisted scheme into their worst nightmare, because what happened next shocked everyone in our community. The document my father Frank pushed toward me that evening contained 3 simple options. Quit my job as marketing director to become Madison's full-time unpaid nanny, pay triple rent on my apartment starting next month, or move out within 30 days. My mother Dorothy sat beside him, dabbing at her eyes with theatrical precision while murmuring about family obligations and how Madison desperately needed help with her 3 children now that baby number 4 was on the way. Let me paint you the full picture of how I ended up in this position. 7 years ago, fresh out of college with my business degree, I'd accepted my parents' offer to rent the 2-bedroom apartment in their downtown building at below market rate. They presented it as their way of helping me get established in my career, and naive 24-year-old me had believed them. The arrangement seemed perfect then, $800 monthly for a place that would typically cost $2,500, allowing me to save money while building my career at a promising tech startup. Meanwhile, my younger sister Madison had taken a different path. The former beauty pageant queen had married Dr. Brett Harrison, a successful cardiac surgeon, right after graduating from law school. She'd practiced law for exactly 6 months before announcing her first pregnancy and retiring to become a full-time society wife. Their children came in quick succession: Emma, now 7 and already showing signs of her mother's manipulative tendencies, Noah, 5 and constantly overlooked in favor of his sisters, and Lily, 3 and thoroughly spoiled. The contrast between our lives couldn't have been starker. While Madison spent her days at the country club, getting weekly spa treatments, and organizing charity galas where she could showcase her designer wardrobe, I'd been grinding my way up the corporate ladder. Starting as a junior marketing associate, I'd poured myself into every project, worked countless overtime hours without complaint, and slowly but surely proven my worth. Just 3 weeks before this family ambush, I'd finally received the promotion I'd been working toward for years, marketing director, with a substantial salary increase and equity options that could potentially be worth millions when our company went public. My parents had called earlier that week, insisting on a formal family dinner to celebrate my promotion. That should have been my first red flag, because Frank and Dorothy Morrison had never once celebrated any of my achievements. When I'd graduated summa cum laude, they'd spent the entire graduation lunch talking about Madison's engagement plans. When I'd landed my first job, they'd barely acknowledged it before launching into concerns about my lack of romantic prospects. But suddenly they wanted to toast my success? I should have known better. The dinner itself had been suspicious from the start. Madison arrived alone, claiming Brett had been called in for emergency surgery, though she'd seemed remarkably unconcerned about her husband's absence. She'd spent the entire meal making passive-aggressive comments about how exhausted she was, how overwhelming it was to manage 3 children with another on the way, how she couldn't possibly keep up with everything despite having a housekeeper, gardener, and part-time nanny already. After dessert, my father had suggested we move to the living room for coffee and a little business discussion. Those words still echo in my mind because Frank Morrison, retired bank executive and current property mogul, never mixed family time with business unless he was about to blindside someone. I'd watched him do it to business partners, to tenants, even to his own siblings when settling their parents' estate. Now it was my turn. Georgia, he'd begun in his boardroom voice, the one that had intimidated junior executives for 30 years, your mother and I have been discussing the family situation. Madison is going to need substantial support with the new baby coming, and we've identified a solution that benefits everyone. That's when the document appeared. Professional quality, clearly drafted by a lawyer, probably weeks in preparation. The terms were simple and brutal. Option 1. Resign from my position immediately, move into the basement apartment of Madison's suburban mansion, and provide full-time childcare for her children with no salary, just room and board. Option 2. Continue working but pay market rate for my apartment, an increase from $800 to $2,400 monthly, effective in 30 days. Option 3. Vacate the premises within the same 30-day period. We've been more than generous, my mother added, her voice dripping with false concern. 7 years of below-market rent has saved you nearly $150,000. We've subsidized your lifestyle long enough. It's time you contributed to this family properly. Madison's performance was Oscar-worthy. She'd gasped, pressed her hand to her chest, and protested weakly. Mother, Daddy, I told you not to pressure her. I'm sure Georgia has her own life to think about. I would never want to impose. But her eyes, those calculating green eyes that had fooled everyone since childhood, told a different story. She was savoring every moment of my shock and dismay. I found my voice finally, though it came out shakier than I'd intended. You're giving me 30 days to either destroy my career or find a new place to live? After 7 years? Business is business, Frank replied curtly. The building needs renovations, property taxes have increased, and we can't continue operating at a loss. Madison needs help, and you need housing. This arrangement solves both problems efficiently. The trap was elegant in its simplicity. They knew my financial situation intimately because Frank had always insisted on reviewing my taxes to help maximize your returns. They knew I'd been aggressive about paying off student loans and had minimal savings. They knew the equity portion of my compensation wouldn't vest for another 2 years. They knew finding a comparable apartment with first month, last month, and security deposit would be nearly impossible in 30 days. They designed this trap to leave me no viable option except submission. What they didn't know was that I'd been recording the entire conversation on my phone, a habit I'd developed after watching my father manipulate one too many business associates. They didn't know that their perfect plan had a fatal flaw, their own arrogance and my determination to expose them for exactly what they were. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 2 years. I needed time to process what had happened and figure out my options. My first stop was my cousin Janet's apartment across town. Janet worked as my father's personal secretary, a position she'd held for 15 years, and if anyone knew the real story behind this ambush, it would be her. Janet opened her door still in her bathrobe, took one look at my face, and immediately ushered me inside. "I've been expecting you," she said, pouring coffee with shaking hands. "Georgia, I'm so sorry. I wanted to warn you, but your father monitors my communications. I couldn't risk my job, not with Mom's medical bills." She proceeded to tell me everything she'd overheard over the past 3 months. The plot had begun when Madison announced her 4th pregnancy, though Janet suspected the timing was no coincidence. Madison had been complaining to our parents about the unfairness of our situation since my promotion had been announced internally at my company. Somehow, she'd learned about the equity package through a mutual acquaintance who worked in our HR department, and the possibility that her older sister might become wealthier than her surgeon husband had sent Madison into a calculated rage. She came to the office at least twice a week, Janet explained, pulling out her personal notebook where she'd documented everything. Always when she knew I'd be at lunch, but I started eating at my desk to listen. "She told your parents that you were wasting your life, that career women like you were what was wrong with society, that they were enabling your selfishness by providing cheap housing." The manipulation had been methodical. Madison had researched the rental market extensively, printed out listings for comparable apartments, calculated exactly how much my parents were losing by renting to me below market rate. She'd presented spreadsheets showing how that money could be better invested, how the building needed upgrades they couldn't afford because of their generosity to me. She'd played on every one of their insecurities and biases, reminding them constantly that she'd given them 3 grandchildren while I remained stubbornly single and childless at 31. "The worst part," Janet continued, showing me photos she'd secretly taken of documents on my father's desk, is that they've been planning this for months. Look at this email from Madison to your father. She specifically says to wait until after your promotion is official because the equity package would make it harder for you to claim financial hardship. The email was dated 2 months prior. In it, Madison outlined her entire strategy. Wait for the promotion, host a celebration dinner to catch me off guard, present the ultimatum as a generous offer rather than extortion, and have everything legally documented to avoid any potential lawsuits. She'd even researched tenant law and made sure they were technically within their rights, though just barely. But the most shocking revelation was yet to come. Janet showed me another document, this one a contractor's estimate for renovating the building's basement apartment, dated 6 weeks ago and specifically labeled Nanny Suite for G. Morrison. They'd been so confident in their plan that they'd already begun preparing my future prison. Armed with this information, I drove to my friend Sophia's house. We'd started at the company together, and she now worked closely with the executive team. If anyone would know the true value of my equity package and the company's timeline, it would be her. Sophia's reaction when I told her about my family's ultimatum was volcanic. Are you kidding me? Georgia, do you have any idea what's about to happen? The acquisition talks are in final stages. We're looking at a potential announcement within 6 months. Your equity package could be worth $2 to $3 million if this goes through. And Madison knows this? The pieces clicked into place. The timing wasn't about my promotion at all. It was about the acquisition. Madison's HR contact must have leaked more than just my promotion details. She knew about the potential buyout, knew that her older sister was about to become independently wealthy, and she'd orchestrated this entire scheme to derail my career before that could happen. We need to test this theory, Sophia suggested. Call Madison. Tell her you're considering a compromise, maybe working part-time or something. See how she reacts. I made the call on speaker so Sophia could witness. Madison answered on the second ring, her voice syrupy sweet. Georgia. I've been so worried about you since last night. I hope you know I had nothing to do with Mom and Dad's decision. I was as shocked as you were. Actually, Madison, I've been thinking. Maybe we could work out some kind of compromise. I could help with the kids on weekends or evenings, keep my job but contribute to childcare when possible. There was a pause, then Madison's mask slipped just a fraction. Oh, well, I don't think that would work. I've already told the kids you'd be moving in. Emma's so excited about decorating your room. In fact, I may have already hired an interior designer for the basement renovation. She had a cancellation and could start next week, so I put down a deposit. But of course, if you're not coming. You hired a designer for my room? Madison, the ultimatum was only yesterday. Silence. Then, in a harder voice, well, I knew you'd make the right choice. Family comes first, doesn't it? Besides, that little job of yours can't be worth destroying our family over. It's not like you're saving lives like Brett. My little job? Madison, I'm a director at a tech company. Yes, well, we all have our hobbies. Listen, I have to go. The kids are asking about their future nanny again. Let me know when you've come to your senses. She hung up, but not before I'd recorded the entire conversation. Sophia stared at me in disbelief. She's already told the kids? She hired a designer? Georgia, this is conspiracy to commit fraud, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and probably a dozen other legal violations. That afternoon, I made one more strategic move. I called Alan Chen, a private investigator I'd met through work when we'd needed background checks on potential partners. Over coffee, I laid out the entire situation and asked for his help documenting everything. This is personal for me, Alan said after reviewing my evidence. I've seen too many families destroyed by this kind of manipulation. Let me dig into your parents' finances, Madison's spending habits, everything. Something tells me this rabbit hole goes deeper than just wanting free childcare. He was right. Within 48 hours, Alan had uncovered a web of financial manipulation that stunned even him. My parents had been claiming me as a dependent on their taxes for years, using the below-market rent as justification even though I earned too much to qualify. The tax savings had been substantial. Madison had been receiving gifts from our parents that coincidentally matched the amount they were losing on my rent, essentially meaning I'd been subsidizing my sister's lavish lifestyle without knowing it. But the most damaging discovery was that Madison had been lying about their financial situation. Brett's income was substantial, but Madison's spending was astronomical. Credit card records showed she was burning through $50,000 a month on personal expenses. Designer clothes, jewelry, spa treatments, lunch at exclusive restaurants, and a suspicious number of cash withdrawals. She'd been hiding this from Brett by intercepting mail and managing their finances solo, claiming it was her contribution since she wasn't working. Your sister isn't just manipulative, Alan concluded, showing me the evidence he'd gathered. She's desperate. My guess is Brett's about to discover the financial black hole she's created, and she needs a free nanny because she won't be able to afford paid help much longer. This isn't about punishing you for being successful. It's about Madison saving herself from the consequences of her own choices. As I sat in my apartment that night, surrounded by evidence of my family's betrayal, I realized I had two options. I could play defense, scramble to find new housing and try to salvage what I could of my life. Or I could go on offense and expose every lie, every manipulation, every cruel calculation that had brought us to this point. Looking at the photos of the nanny suite they'd been preparing for me, at the emails discussing how to handle me, at the tax documents showing years of fraud, the choice became crystal clear. They wanted war? They were about to get one. The psychological warfare began exactly 3 days after the ultimatum dinner. I'd returned to work, trying to maintain normalcy while secretly meeting with lawyers and searching for apartments, when my phone exploded with calls and texts from family members I hadn't heard from in months. The coordination was impressive in its thoroughness and devastating in its cruelty. It started with my mother's morning call, timed precisely for when I'd be preparing for my first meeting. Georgia, sweetheart, she began, her voice trembling with practiced emotion, I couldn't sleep last night thinking about our family falling apart. Dr. Morrison says stress like this could trigger my heart condition. You know how fragile I've been since the surgery. I just keep thinking, what if I don't live to see our family reunited? What if my last memories are of this horrible conflict? The manipulation was textbook. My mother had indeed had minor heart surgery 2 years prior, a routine valve repair that her doctors had declared completely successful. She'd used it as emotional leverage ever since, particularly when she wanted something from me. But hearing her voice crack, even knowing it was calculated, still made my chest tighten with guilt. Next came my father's voicemail, left during a critical presentation I was giving to potential investors. His message was pure corporate intimidation dressed up as paternal concern. Georgia, I've been patient, but my patience has limits. I've spoken with my attorneys, and they've advised me that given the month-to-month nature of your tenancy, I could require you to vacate immediately. I'm giving you 30 days as a courtesy to family, but that courtesy can be revoked. Additionally, I'm considering selling the entire building. The market is excellent right now, and several developers have expressed interest. Make the right choice before you force my hand. By lunch, the extended family had joined the assault. My Aunt Helen, my mother's sister who'd always prided herself on being the family matriarch, left a scathing voicemail. Georgia Morrison, I am appalled by your selfishness. Your sister is pregnant and overwhelmed, and you're choosing some job over family? No career will keep you warm at night when you're old and alone. No promotion will hold your hand when you're dying. Madison has given your parents the gift of grandchildren, continued the family line, and what have you given them? Stock options? Shame on you. Uncle Richard, my father's brother, took a different approach in his text message, heard about the situation with Madison. As a businessman, I understand the appeal of career advancement, but let me give you some advice. Family is the only real investment that matters. Your sister made the smart choice marrying well and focusing on raising the next generation. You still have time to correct your course. Don't let pride cost you everything. The church brigade began their assault that evening. My parents had apparently shared a prayer request at their weekly Bible study, and within hours, I was receiving messages from people I'd met maybe twice in my life. The consensus was clear. Honoring thy father and mother meant sacrificing my career, and any resistance was tantamount to spiritual rebellion. Dear Georgia, read one particularly lengthy email from Mrs. Patterson, the pastor's wife. I'd been praying for your family situation, and God has laid it on my heart to reach out. The Bible is clear about a woman's highest calling being to serve her family. Your sister is walking in her purpose as a mother, and she needs your support. Consider this an opportunity to practice Christian sacrifice and submission. Your reward in heaven will far exceed any earthly career achievement. But the pressure campaign wasn't limited to emotional manipulation. 3 days after the ultimatum, I returned home to find my apartment in chaos. The maintenance man, Robert, was in my living room with the building's master keys, looking deeply uncomfortable as Madison directed him to check for maintenance issues. Just making sure everything's in order, Madison chirped, her 7-year-old Emma and 5-year-old Noah trailing behind her. Kids, this is where Aunt Georgia lives for now. But soon she'll be living with us. Isn't that exciting? Emma, already her mother's daughter, looked around my apartment with disdain. It's small. And there's no playroom. How come you don't have any toys, Aunt Georgia? Because Aunt Georgia has been too busy with her silly job to prepare for children, Madison answered before I could speak. But that's all going to change, isn't it? I managed to maintain my composure long enough to document Madison's illegal entry on my phone and quietly inform Robert that any future unauthorized entries would result in legal action. He mumbled an apology, admitted that my parents had ordered him to give Madison access whenever she wanted, and quickly left. But Madison wasn't finished. She'd brought a measuring tape and began measuring my furniture to see what would fit in your new room at our house. The children ran wild through my apartment, Noah accidentally knocking over a vase while Emma drew on my walls with a marker she'd somehow found. When I tried to stop them, Madison accused me of not being maternal enough and suggested this was good practice for when you're their full-time caregiver. The harassment escalated over the next week. My locks mysteriously malfunctioned twice, requiring emergency locksmith visits that I suspected were sabotage. My parking space was suddenly reassigned to another tenant, forcing me to park blocks away. The heat in my apartment began having issues that somehow only affected my unit, leaving me freezing in the middle of winter while the maintenance department claimed they couldn't identify the problem. At work, the situation became even more precarious. My parents, in a move that stunned me with its audacity, showed up at my office building during the lunch rush. My father, dressed in his most imposing business suit, and my mother, looking frielier than I'd ever seen her, caused a scene in the lobby when security wouldn't let them up without my permission. "We just want to talk to our daughter," my mother wailed loudly enough for everyone to hear. "She won't return our calls. We're worried sick about her." This was patently false, as I'd been responding to their messages with the same consistent answer: I would not be quitting my job, and I was actively seeking new housing. But the damage was done. By the time security had escorted them out, half my colleagues had witnessed the spectacle. The gossip mill went into overdrive, and I found myself having to explain the family emergency to my boss Marcus, who was thankfully understanding but clearly concerned about the drama affecting our workplace. The stress began taking its toll. I found myself unable to sleep, jumping at every unexpected sound, wondering if it was Madison with the master key again. I started stress eating, downing entire pints of ice cream while scrolling through apartment listings I couldn't afford. My work performance, which had always been exemplary, began to suffer. I made errors in reports, zoned out during meetings, and struggled to concentrate on the projects that had once energized me. Marcus called me into his office at the end of the second week. "Georgia, I need to ask, is everything okay? You've been our rock for years, but lately, you seem distracted, exhausted." If you need some time off to deal with personal matters, we can arrange that. I broke down and told him everything. The ultimatum, the harassment, the family pressure, all of it. His expression grew increasingly grim as I spoke, and when I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. First of all, he said finally, I want you to know that your position here is secure. You're not just an employee, Georgia, you're a crucial part of our leadership team. Second, have you considered that this harassment might be intentional sabotage? If your sister knows about the acquisition potential, disrupting your work performance could affect your equity value. I hadn't considered that angle, but it made perfect sense. If I was forced to take leave or, worse, if my performance issues led to termination, my equity package could be severely impacted or even forfeited entirely. I think you need to start documenting everything, Marcus continued. Every interaction, every incident of harassment, every attempt to interfere with your work. And Georgia? We have security cameras in the lobby. I'll make sure you get a copy of your parents' visit. Consider it evidence. That night, I called my friend Alan, the private investigator, with an update and a request. I need you to dig deeper into Madison's marriage. Something doesn't add up. Brett's been conveniently absent through all of this, always traveling or in surgery. In 7 years of knowing him, I've never seen him miss this many family events. Alan's findings, delivered 2 days later, were illuminating. Brett had indeed been traveling, but not just for medical conferences. He'd been actively interviewing for positions at hospitals in other states, particularly those with more favorable divorce laws. Financial records showed he'd recently opened a separate bank account and had been slowly transferring funds. He'd also been consulting with a forensic accountant about Madison's spending. Your brother-in-law is planning his exit strategy, Alan concluded. My guess is Madison knows or suspects, which explains the desperation for free childcare. If Brett divorces her, she'll lose the lifestyle she's accustomed to, and with her spending habits exposed, she might even lose custody. She needs you as a backup plan for when her house of cards collapses. The final straw came on a Friday evening. I'd worked late, trying to catch up on projects despite my exhaustion, when I returned to find my apartment door slightly open. Inside, Madison sat on my couch with all 3 children, my laptop open in front of her. Oh good, you're home, she said brightly. I was just showing the kids pictures from your company website. Look, children, this is what Aunt Georgia does instead of spending time with family. But I could see she'd been through more than just the company website. My email was open, my personal documents folder had been accessed, and I realized with horror that she'd probably seen my correspondence with lawyers about the harassment. Get out, I said quietly, my voice shaking with barely controlled rage. Get out of my apartment right now, or I'm calling the police. Madison's mask finally dropped completely. You'd call the police on your pregnant sister? On your nieces and nephew? God, you really are as cold as Mom says. No wonder no man wants you. No wonder you'll die alone with your precious career and your stock options. She gathered the children, who looked confused and upset by the tension, and headed for the door. But before leaving, she turned back with a smile that chilled me to my core. Brett doesn't know yet, but he will. And when he leaves me, when I'm a single mother of 4, guess who'll be expected to help? Family takes care of family, Georgia. One way or another, you'll learn that lesson. As the door closed behind them, I sank to my floor and finally let myself cry. Not just from exhaustion or frustration, but from the devastating realization that the family I'd loved, despite their flaws, had never really loved me back. I was just a resource to be exploited, a problem to be solved, a disappointment to be corrected. But as I sat there among the ruins of my family relationships, something hardened inside me. They'd pushed too far, revealed too much of their true nature. If they wanted to destroy me, they'd have to do better than this amateur-hour harassment campaign. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I needed. Diane Mitchell, the best tenant rights attorney in the city and a woman known for taking no prisoners in court. Diane? It's Georgia Morrison. I need your help. My family is trying to destroy my life, and I have evidence of everything. How soon can we meet? How about now? She replied. I have a feeling this is going to be interesting. She had no idea how right she was. The eviction notice arrived on a Tuesday morning, slipped under my door while I was in the shower. The timing was deliberate, calculated to ruin my entire day before an important client presentation. 30 days to vacate for multiple lease violations, including unauthorized occupants, damage to property, and disturbing other tenants. Every accusation was a complete fabrication, but the legal letterhead and formal language sent ice through my veins. Diane Mitchell reviewed the document that afternoon in her downtown office, her expression growing darker with each paragraph. This is what we call a retaliatory eviction, she said, setting the paper down with disgust. Every single claim here is baseless, and I suspect your father knows that. But he's betting you won't have the resources or energy to fight it while also dealing with finding new housing. She pulled up the tenant protection laws on her computer. Georgia, they've made a serious mistake. The harassment you've documented, the illegal entries, the deliberate interference with your quiet enjoyment of the property, it all constitutes constructive eviction. We can not only fight this, we can countersue for damages. But I need to warn you. This is going to get uglier before it gets better. Diane's prediction proved accurate within 24 hours. I woke the next morning to no hot water. The maintenance department claimed a building-wide issue, but my neighbor confirmed their shower was working fine. By evening, the electricity in my apartment began flickering randomly, just enough to disrupt my work-from-home setup but not enough to claim a real outage. The heating issues worsened until I could see my breath in my bedroom. But the infrastructure warfare was nothing compared to Madison's social media campaign. She'd always been strategic about her online presence, cultivating an image of the perfect mother and devoted wife. Now she weaponized that carefully crafted persona against me. The post started subtly, feeling overwhelmed today. So grateful for family who steps up when needed. Praying others will find it in their hearts to do the same. Her followers, mostly other suburban mothers and church friends, responded with sympathy and offers of help. Madison graciously declined each one, painting herself as a martyr who didn't want to burden others. Within days, the posts became more pointed. When you're 7 months pregnant with 3 young children and family chooses career over blood. But we persevere with God's grace. The comments section became a cesspool of judgment against an unnamed sister who was clearly me. Women who'd never met me decided I was selfish, unfeminine, and probably bitter about Madison's perfect life. The narrative spread through our social circles like wildfire. Poor, pregnant Madison struggling alone while her career-obsessed sister refused to help. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from mutual acquaintances. Georgia, I had no idea Madison was having such a hard time. Is it true you won't help with the kids? Can't believe you're abandoning your pregnant sister. What would your grandmother think? Money isn't everything. Family should come first. I wanted to scream the truth, to post screenshots of the eviction notice, the ultimatum, the evidence of their conspiracy. But Diane had forbidden any social media engagement. Let them hang themselves, she advised. Every post Madison makes is evidence of defamation. Every lie she tells is another count in our lawsuit. The professional sabotage escalated when a potential client called to cancel a meeting, citing concerns about company stability given your public family situation. Somehow, Madison's social media campaign had reached my professional network. I found out later she'd been messaging people on LinkedIn, expressing concern about my mental state and suggesting they might want to reconsider doing business with someone who could abandon family so callously. Through all this, Brett remained conspicuously absent. His medical conference had extended into a fellowship observation, then a research collaboration. Madison's posts never mentioned his absence, maintaining the fiction of the devoted husband who was simply dedicated to saving lives. But Alan's continued investigation revealed Brett had been back in town twice without Madison's knowledge, meeting with divorce attorneys and documenting Madison's behavior. The breaking point came when I received an unexpected call from Brett himself. "Georgia, we need to talk. Can you meet me at the coffee shop on 5th Street? Come alone, and please don't tell Madison." I found him in the back corner, looking haggard and 10 years older than when I'd last seen him. The competent surgeon was gone, replaced by a man clearly at the end of his rope. "I know what's happening," he said without preamble. "The ultimatum, the eviction, all of it. Madison thinks I'm clueless, but I've been watching, documenting. Georgia, I'm filing for divorce and custody. I need your help." He showed me his evidence, thousands of dollars in unauthorized charges, secret credit cards, loans taken out in his name. Madison had burned through their savings and was now drowning in debt. But worse than the financial betrayal was what he'd discovered about her pregnancy. "She's not pregnant," he said quietly. "I found the fake ultrasounds in her email. She ordered them from some website that makes novelty medical images. I confirmed with her OBGYN, there's no pregnancy. She's been faking the whole thing to manipulate everyone, probably planning to miscarry once you were trapped as her nanny." The room spun. Even knowing Madison was manipulative, this level of deception stunned me. "Brett, why are you telling me this?" "Because my children need at least one sane family member in their lives. Madison's been poisoning them against you, telling them you hate them, that you're trying to break up our family. Emma asked me last week why Aunt Georgia wants Daddy to leave. I need witness testimony about Madison's behavior, and I need someone stable in my kids' lives when this explodes." I agreed to help, and Brett provided me with crucial information: Madison's secret credit cards, the extent of her debts, and most importantly, recorded conversations where she discussed the fake pregnancy with her best friend Cheryl. He also revealed that my parents had been giving Madison large monthly gifts that she'd hidden from him, money that had enabled her spending addiction. Armed with this new ammunition, I met with Diane to update our strategy. "This changes everything," she said, reviewing Brett's evidence. "Your parents haven't just been harassing you, they've been enabling financial fraud. If they knew about the fake pregnancy, they're complicit in an elaborate scheme to defraud you of your career and freedom." The next morning, I was served with another legal document, but this one made me smile: a restraining order filed by Madison against me, claiming I was stalking and harassing her. The audacity was breathtaking, considering she'd been breaking into my apartment for weeks. But Diane had anticipated this move. "Perfect," she said when I called her. "She's just given us the opportunity to present our evidence in court. She'll have to prove harassment, which means we get to show the judge the security footage of her illegal entries, the messages from your maintenance man, all of it." That evening, as I sat in my freezing apartment wearing 3 layers and trying to work by candlelight after another mysterious power outage, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. It was a reporter from the local news station. "Ms. Morrison? I'm calling about a story tip we received regarding tenant harassment and family fraud. We understand you're being forced from your home by parents who want to enslave you as an unpaid nanny. Would you care to comment?" I was about to decline when Diane's voice echoed in my head: "Let them hang themselves. If Madison wanted to make this public, if my parents wanted to escalate, then maybe it was time the whole city knew exactly what kind of people they were." "Actually," I said, pulling up my meticulously organized evidence folders, "I have quite a bit to say, and I have the documentation to back up every word." The reporter's intake of breath told me she recognized a bombshell story when she heard one. "Can you meet our crew tomorrow morning? We'd like to get this on the evening news." As I hung up, my apartment suddenly flooded with heat and light. The mysterious technical issues had miraculously resolved themselves, probably because someone had realized I was about to go very public with the harassment. But it was too late for damage control. I opened my laptop and began composing an email to every family member who'd pressured me, every church member who'd judged me, every mutual friend who'd believed Madison's lies. Attached were screenshots of the fake ultrasounds, the eviction notice, the restraining order, and a preview of what would be on the news tomorrow. "The truth will be public in 24 hours, I wrote. "You might want to reconsider which side of this story you want to be on. My phone immediately exploded with calls and texts, but I turned it off and poured myself a glass of wine. Tomorrow, the war would go nuclear. Tonight, I would enjoy the last quiet moments before my family's carefully constructed facade came crashing down around them. The empire they'd built on lies, manipulation, and my subsidized rent was about to collapse, and I had a front row seat to the destruction. They'd wanted me to learn that family comes first? I was about to teach them that actions have consequences, and that the family you choose is sometimes worth more than the family you're born into. The morning the news story aired, I was already at my new apartment across town, having signed a lease the previous evening with the signing bonus for my new job. The offer had come through from our competitor, Technova Industries, with a compensation package that made my previous salary look like pocket change, double the base pay, comprehensive relocation assistance, and immediate vesting of equity worth potentially millions. The best part? Their CEO, Sandra Kim, had personally called to assure me that family drama would never interfere with your work here. I watched the morning news from my laptop while professional movers packed my belongings. The segment was titled Family Fraud: How Parents Tried to Force Daughter into Modern Slavery, and reporter Jennifer Walsh didn't pull any punches. The security footage of Madison breaking into my apartment played in damning clarity, followed by audio of my father's threatening voicemails and screenshots of the fake pregnancy ultrasounds. My phone, set to silent, lit up like a Christmas tree. I ignored it, focusing instead on the movers and my checklist. But I did check my email, where Brett's message waited, watching the news with my lawyer. Madison's locked herself in the bathroom screaming, "Thank you for having the courage I didn't." By noon, I was at Diane's office finalizing our lawsuit. "Your parents have been calling nonstop," she informed me with barely concealed glee. "Their lawyer is begging for a meeting. Apparently, the country club has already suspended your father pending an investigation, and your mother was asked to step down from the hospital charity board." We filed 3 separate actions that afternoon. A harassment and illegal eviction suit against my parents, a defamation case against Madison, and a fraud claim related to years of tax manipulation. The damages sought were substantial, but more importantly, the cases were now public record. Any reporter could access the details, and given the morning's news coverage, many would. The restraining order hearing was scheduled for the following Monday. Madison had made a critical error in filing it, not realizing it would give us a legal forum to present our evidence. Diane had subpoenaed security footage from my building, phone records, and even the interior designer Madison had hired for my nanny suite. But the real bombshell came from an unexpected source. Cheryl, Madison's best friend and confidant, reached out through my lawyer. "I can't be part of this anymore," her message read. "Madison's lost her mind, and I have recordings that prove everything. She made me help fake the pregnancy photos. I'll testify if you give me immunity from prosecution." That weekend, while my family scrambled to control the narrative, I executed the next phase of my plan. The local news had picked up the story, but social media would deliver the killing blow. I created a simple website, The Truth About the Morrison Family, where I posted every piece of evidence in chronological order. The fake ultrasounds, the tax fraud documentation, Madison's spending records, the conspiracy emails, all of it. The site went viral within hours. Someone shared it on Reddit, and from there it exploded across Twitter and Facebook. The court of public opinion rendered its verdict swiftly and harshly. Madison's carefully curated Instagram account was flooded with accusations of fraud and child abuse. My parents' business phones rang off the hook with cancelled contracts and withdrawn social invitations. Sunday evening, Brett made his move. He filed for emergency custody, citing Madison's psychological instability and financial fraud. The fake pregnancy was the cornerstone of his case, proving she was willing to manipulate even her own children for personal gain. He also revealed that Madison had been telling the children their parents were divorcing because Aunt Georgia is trying to steal Daddy, a form of parental alienation that judges particularly despised. The restraining order hearing Monday morning was a massacre. Madison arrived looking haggard, flanked by my parents and their increasingly desperate lawyer. I sat with Diane, calm and prepared, as we systematically destroyed their case. Your Honor, Diane began, my client is accused of harassment by someone who broke into her apartment no fewer than 12 times in 2 weeks. We have security footage of each incident. The judge's expression grew stonier as we presented evidence. The maintenance man testified about being ordered to give Madison access. The interior designer confirmed she'd been hired 6 weeks before the ultimatum, proving premeditation. But the most damaging testimony came from Cheryl, who appeared via video link. Madison asked me to help stage the pregnancy photos, Cheryl testified, clearly uncomfortable but determined. She said it was the only way to get Georgia to quit her job. She laughed about it, said Georgia was too stupid to verify with doctors. She even practiced her miscarriage story, planned to blame Georgia for the stress. Madison's lawyer tried to object, but the damage was done. The judge not only denied the restraining order but issued one against Madison instead, forbidding her from coming within 500 feet of me or my new apartment. As we left the courthouse, my parents tried to approach. My mother, looking every bit her age for the first time, reached out with tears streaming. Georgia, please. We can fix this. We're family. No, I said firmly. Family doesn't conspire to destroy each other. Family doesn't commit fraud or attempt extortion. You're just people I share DNA with. My father, his usual commanding presence diminished, tried a different approach. The building's hemorrhaging money. Other tenants are leaving because of the news coverage. If you'd just come home, we could make this go away. I am home, I replied. My new home, where locks work and family doesn't have keys. Enjoy your renovation project. The news crews captured it all, the dejected parents begging their successful daughter for forgiveness while she walked away with dignity intact. The optics were devastating for them and perfectly scripted for my narrative. That afternoon, Brett's emergency custody hearing delivered another blow to Madison. The judge, presented with evidence of the fake pregnancy and parental alienation, granted Brett temporary full custody with Madison allowed only supervised visitation. The court-appointed supervisor would ensure she couldn't poison the children against their father or me. But Madison wasn't finished. That evening, in a spectacular display of poor judgment, she appeared on a local talk radio show to tell her side. What followed was 45 minutes of increasingly unhinged ranting that culminated in her accidentally revealing her racist views about her Korean brother-in-law's family and making threats against me that the host wisely recorded. Georgia thinks she's won, Madison snarled over the airwaves, but I know where she works now. I know her routines. She can't hide from family forever. I'll make her pay for destroying my life if it's the last thing I do. The host, clearly alarmed, ended the interview early, but the damage was done. The audio went viral, adding criminal threats to Madison's growing list of legal troubles. My new employer's security team reached out immediately, assuring me they were aware of the situation and had implemented additional precautions. Tuesday brought unexpected allies. 3 other tenants from my parents' building filed a class action lawsuit, revealing they'd experienced similar harassment when trying to negotiate fair rent prices. The building's reputation, once sterling, was now toxic. Property values in the area began declining as the story became a cautionary tale about landlord abuse. My parents' lawyer reached out to Diane with a settlement offer, drop all lawsuits in exchange for $100,000 and a public apology. Diane laughed so hard she nearly dropped her phone. Counteroffer, she told him. Full admission of guilt, $500,000 in damages, and they transfer ownership of the building to a professional management company with no family involvement. Wednesday, the acquisition of my former company was announced. My equity package, preserved thanks to Sandra Kim's intervention and backdated to recognize my contributions, was worth $2.3 million after taxes. The timing couldn't have been better, or worse for my family, as it made headlines alongside their ongoing legal troubles. Madison's final desperate gambit came Thursday afternoon. She attempted to break into my old apartment, apparently forgetting it was now empty and under surveillance. The security cameras captured her screaming and vandalism as she destroyed the fixtures, spray-painted obscenities on the walls, and ultimately set fire to the carpet before being arrested. Her mugshot, featuring mascara-streaked cheeks and a deranged expression, became an instant meme. When you realize actions have consequences spread across social media, ensuring that anyone Googling Madison Harrison would find her lowest moment immortalized forever. Friday brought the beginning of the end. Brett's divorce lawyer, armed with evidence of financial fraud and Madison's arrest, filed for permanent sole custody and a forensic accounting of all marital assets. The fake pregnancy, the secret debts, the threats against family members, it all painted a picture of someone unfit to parent. My parents, facing mounting legal bills and a collapsing business empire, finally sent a message through their lawyer: they would accept our settlement terms. The admission of guilt would be public, the damages substantial, and their control over the building ended forever. As I sat in my new corner office at Technova that afternoon, looking out at the city skyline, my phone buzzed with a text from Brett: "Kids are asking if they can see their Aunt Georgia." I told them yes. Madison's in psychiatric hold for evaluation. "Thank you for saving my family." I smiled, realizing that in losing the family I was born into, I'd gained something far more valuable. Freedom, self-respect, and the chance to build a chosen family based on mutual respect rather than blood obligation. The war was over, and against all odds, I'd won everything worth keeping. The Morrison family empire took exactly 6 weeks to completely implode. Like watching a building demolition in slow motion, each support beam buckled and crashed in a predictable cascade of destruction. I observed from a safe distance, settled in my new life while the family that tried to destroy me learned what consequences looked like. The first pillar to fall was Madison's marriage. Despite Brett's initial resolve to divorce quietly for the children's sake, Madison's psychiatric evaluation revealed more than anyone expected. During her 72-hour hold, she'd confessed to planning a fake miscarriage that would have involved actual medical procedures, potentially criminal fraud against insurance companies. She'd also admitted to fantasizing about harming me, detailed enough that the psychiatrist recommended extended treatment. Brett filed for divorce on grounds of fraud and mental cruelty. The financial forensics he'd ordered revealed Madison had opened 17 credit cards in both their names, maxing out each one on designer goods she'd hidden in storage units around the city. The total debt exceeded $800,000, not including the money she'd siphoned from their joint accounts. The prenuptial agreement she'd signed, thinking herself cleverly protected as the non-earning spouse, became her downfall. It specifically excluded debts incurred through fraud. The custody battle was non-existent. Madison's own lawyer advised her not to contest Brett's petition for sole custody after reviewing the evidence. The recorded conversations where she'd coached Emma to lie about Aunt Georgia trying to steal Daddy were particularly damning. The judge ordered supervised visitation only, 2 hours every other weekend, with a court-appointed monitor present. I attended one hearing as a witness for Brett. Madison's appearance shocked even me. Gone was the polished suburban princess. In her place sat a gaunt woman with greasy hair and hollow eyes, wearing an ill-fitting suit clearly borrowed from someone else. She couldn't meet my gaze as I testified about her break-ins and threats, but I caught her muttering under her breath, still blaming everyone but herself. The second pillar was my parents' social standing. The country club didn't just suspend my father. They permanently revoked his membership after 3 other members came forward with stories of his business negotiations that bordered on extortion. The domino effect was swift. He lost his seat on 2 corporate boards, his golf buddies stopped returning calls, and invitations to social events dried up overnight. My mother fared no better. The hospital charity board she'd chaired for a decade issued a public statement distancing themselves from her after donors threatened to withdraw support. Her church friends, the same ones who'd pressured me about family duty, suddenly remembered urgent commitments whenever she called. The prayer chain that had once mobilized against me now buzzed with whispers about the Morrison family's unchristian behavior. Their marriage, already strained by the crisis, began showing cracks. During a deposition for our lawsuit, my father accidentally revealed he'd been hiding assets from my mother, preparing for a potential divorce of his own. She discovered he'd transferred several properties into a trust she knew nothing about, protecting them from any judgments but also from her. "Your father's been planning to leave me," she sobbed during an ill-advised call to my office, which I recorded with my lawyer on the line. "He says I pushed too hard with you, that I ruined everything. Georgia, I only wanted what was best for the family." "You wanted free labor," I corrected coldly. "And you were willing to destroy my life to get it." "These are called consequences, Mother." The third pillar was financial ruin. The class action lawsuit from other tenants gained momentum as more victims came forward. The pattern was clear: my parents had used similar tactics on anyone who couldn't afford market rent, particularly single women and elderly tenants. The state attorney general's office opened an investigation into their rental practices spanning 2 decades. Unable to afford quality legal representation for multiple lawsuits, my parents made a fatal error. They hired Madison's friend from law school, someone who'd passed the bar on the 3rd try and specialized in traffic violations. Against seasoned attorneys like Diane, it was a massacre. Every motion was denied, every argument dismantled, every delay tactic rejected. The building itself became a millstone. After the news coverage, vacancy rates soared to 60%. The remaining tenants organized a rent strike, citing unsafe conditions and landlord harassment. The city inspector, alerted by the media attention, found numerous code violations that required immediate expensive repairs. My parents couldn't afford the fixes or the fines, and no bank would refinance given the pending lawsuits. Madison's situation deteriorated weekly. After the divorce settlement, she received nothing but her personal belongings and the debt she'd accumulated. Brett successfully argued that her fraud voided any claim to alimony. She moved back with our parents, a crushing blow to someone who defined herself by material success. Unable to work due to her notoriety, she tried various schemes to make money. A GoFundMe claiming she was a victim of family betrayal raised $12 before being reported and removed. An attempt to sell her story to tabloids failed when they fact-checked her claims. Even her Instagram influencer dreams died as brands distanced themselves from the woman now known as fake pregnancy Madison. The fourth pillar to fall was the extended family support system. Uncle Richard, who'd lectured me about family values, quietly withdrew after his business partners expressed concern about his association with the Morrison scandal. Aunt Helen publicly apologized to me on Facebook, admitting she'd been misled by false information and praising my courage in standing up to abuse. The family reunion that summer was cancelled when it became clear I'd be welcome, but my parents and Madison would not. Cousins who'd remained neutral chose sides, and most chose mine after seeing the evidence. The family matriarch, my grandmother's sister in Florida, sent a scathing letter to my parents disinheriting them from her will, stating she was disgusted by their attempt to enslave their own daughter. By month 5, the complete collapse was evident. My parents' house, mortgaged to cover legal fees, went into foreclosure. The building was seized by the state for unpaid taxes and code violations. Their cars were repossessed. The country club membership they'd treasured became a bitter memory as they drove past in their borrowed sedan, no longer welcome on the grounds they'd once treated as a second home. Madison's children, thriving under Brett's stable care, began showing remarkable improvement. Emma stopped lying compulsively once removed from her mother's influence. Noah, no longer overlooked, blossomed into a confident child. Even little Lily showed fewer tantrums and better emotional regulation. Their supervised visits with Madison often ended early when she couldn't stop trying to manipulate them against their father. During one visit I observed at Brett's request, Madison tried to convince Emma that Aunt Georgia stole Mommy's house. Emma, now 8 and in therapy, responded with startling clarity, "No, Mommy, you lied about being pregnant. My therapist says lying is wrong and has consequences." Madison's face crumbled, realizing her own daughter had seen through her facade. The criminal charges from Madison's arrest stuck. She pled guilty to vandalism and criminal mischief to avoid jail time, receiving 2 years probation and mandatory anger management classes. The viral mugshot ensured that any background check would reveal her crime, effectively ending any hope of professional employment. My father's business ventures crumbled as partners withdrew and clients fled. His reputation as a sharp negotiator transformed into notoriety as a manipulative landlord who'd tried to extort his own daughter. Former associates shared stories of his questionable tactics, emboldened by his fall from grace. The SEC opened an investigation into some of his property deals, finding irregularities that promised more legal troubles ahead. My mother aged a decade in those 6 months. The woman who'd prided herself on appearances now wore the same 3 outfits in rotation, her jewelry sold to pay lawyers. She haunted the church she'd attended for 30 years, sitting alone in back pews while former friends averted their eyes. The pastor, pressured by congregants disturbed by the family's actions, gently suggested she might be more comfortable at another church. The final blow came when the IRS, alerted by our lawsuit's revelations, audited my parents' returns for the past decade. The fraudulent dependent claims were just the beginning. They found unreported rental income, suspicious charitable deductions, and evidence of tax evasion that triggered criminal referrals. The massive bill, with penalties and interest, exceeded their remaining assets by millions. Madison's last desperate attempt at relevance was a self-published memoir titled Betrayed. A sister's treachery, which she promoted on social media as her truth. The book, poorly written and full of easily disproven lies, sold 11 copies, mostly to journalists looking for material to mock. The Amazon reviews were brutal, with readers posting screenshots of court documents that contradicted her claims. The house of cards they'd built on my subsidized rent, their manipulation, and their assumed superiority had collapsed entirely. 3 people who'd once considered themselves pillars of the community were now cautionary tales, their names synonymous with greed, fraud, and the dangers of treating family as property. As I watched for my new life, successful and free, I felt not triumph but a quiet sadness. They'd had everything: loving daughter, comfortable lives, respected positions in society, and they'd thrown it all away for the illusion of control. Their collapse was entirely self-inflicted, a Greek tragedy where hubris met reality and reality won. But the strangest part was their continued inability to accept responsibility. In every legal filing, every public statement, every overheard conversation, they remained convinced they were victims. I was the ungrateful daughter who'd destroyed the family. The media was biased. The judges were unfair. The tenants were opportunists. Everyone was wrong except them. That delusion, more than any external consequence, ensured their permanent exile from the life they'd once known. Because until you can admit fault, you can never rebuild. And the Morrison family, broken and scattered, seemed determined to blame everyone but themselves until the bitter end. 6 months after the courthouse steps confrontation that marked the end of my old life, I stood on the balcony of my downtown penthouse, watching the sunrise paint the city in shades of gold and possibility. The contrast between this moment and those desperate weeks in my freezing apartment felt like a lifetime rather than half a year. But healing, I'd learned, isn't measured in time but in the distance between who you were and who you've become. The journey to this moment hadn't been linear. The first month after cutting contact with my parents and Madison was harder than I'd anticipated. Despite everything they'd done, despite the clear evidence of their manipulation and cruelty, I found myself grieving. Not for who they were, but for who I'd always hoped they could be. The parents who might have celebrated my success instead of resenting it. The sister who could have been a friend instead of a rival. The family that might have loved me for who I was rather than what I could provide. My therapist, Dr. Sarah Chen, specialized in family trauma and had seen countless cases like mine. "You're mourning the death of an illusion," she explained during one of our early sessions. "The hardest part isn't letting go of toxic people, it's letting go of the hope that they'll change." Through months of intensive therapy, I began to understand the dynamics I'd been trapped in my entire life. My parents had cast me as the scapegoat from childhood, the responsible one who could be counted on to sacrifice for others. Madison was the golden child, whose wants became everyone's needs. These roles, established before we could even understand them, had shaped every family interaction for 3 decades. Children who grow up in these dynamics often become overachievers, Dr. Chen explained. You learned early that love was conditional on performance, so you performed constantly. But no amount of success could change your fundamental role in the family system. The breakthrough came when I realized I'd been trying to earn something that was never available, unconditional love from people incapable of providing it. My parents loved the idea of a dutiful daughter, not the actual person I was. Madison loved the resources I could provide, not the sister who'd tried so hard to connect with her. Once I accepted this truth, the healing could truly begin. Building healthy boundaries became my new project, approached with the same determination I'd once applied to my career. No contact with my parents wasn't cruelty, it was self-preservation. Limiting interaction with extended family members wasn't punishment, it was protecting my peace. Every boundary was a brick in the wall between my new life and the toxicity of my past. The relationship with Brett and the children developed slowly, carefully. He understood my need for distance initially, but the kids missed their Aunt Georgia. We started with video calls, then lunch dates, eventually progressing to weekend outings. Watching them flourish away from Madison's influence was both heartening and heartbreaking. Emma, in particular, showed signs of the same people-pleasing tendencies I recognized in myself, and I made it my mission to help her understand that her worth wasn't tied to others' approval. Aunt Georgia, she said during one of our museum visits, Mom says you're mean for not helping our family. But Dr. Jennifer says boundaries aren't mean. I'm confused. I knelt to her level, choosing my words carefully. Sometimes, Emma, people call us mean when we stop doing what they want. But taking care of yourself isn't mean. It's necessary. Just like you need to eat healthy food and get enough sleep, you need to protect your feelings too. She nodded solemnly, processing this information with the intensity of a child forced to grow up too fast. Is that why you don't talk to Grandma and Grandpa anymore? Yes, sweetheart. Sometimes, even people who love us can hurt us. And when they won't stop hurting us, we have to protect ourselves, even if it makes them sad. Noah and Lily, younger and less burdened by their mother's manipulation, adapted more easily. They saw me simply as Aunt Georgia who took them to fun places and didn't make them feel bad about themselves. Their innocent affection was a balm to the wounds left by family rejection. Career success at Technova exceeded even my optimistic projections. Sandra Kim became more than a boss, she evolved into a mentor who understood the value of employees who'd overcome adversity. The equity from my previous company funded investments that grew steadily. Within 6 months, I'd accumulated more wealth than my parents had seen in their lifetime, a irony not lost on anyone who knew the story. But money, I discovered, was just a tool. The real treasure was the freedom to build a life authentically mine. I established the Phoenix Scholarship Fund, named for Rising from Ashes, to help young people escape abusive family situations. The first recipient was a brilliant young woman whose parents demanded she abandon her engineering scholarship to care for younger siblings. Watching her graduate debt-free, knowing she'd avoided my trap, gave me a joy no corporate achievement could match. The chosen family I built proved infinitely more valuable than blood relations. Sophia from my old company became the sister I'd actually wanted, someone who celebrated successes and offered support without hidden agendas. Marcus, my former boss, evolved into a father figure who provided guidance without manipulation. Diane, my attorney, transitioned from legal counsel to trusted friend who'd proven loyalty under fire. Romance entered my life unexpectedly through a conference in Seattle. David Kim, no relation to Sandra, was a venture capitalist with his own family trauma history. His parents had disowned him for choosing business over medicine, and he understood the particular grief of being rejected for succeeding differently than expected. Our first date lasted 8 hours, comparing scars and realizing they'd healed into similar shapes. The thing about toxic families, he said over wine at our 6th-month anniversary dinner, is they prepare you to recognize real love when you find it. We know what manipulation looks like, so we can appreciate authenticity. He was right. Our relationship, built on mutual respect and maintained boundaries, showed me what healthy love looked like. No ultimatums, no conditional affection, no emotional manipulation disguised as concern. Just two people choosing each other daily, building something real on foundations of trust. The legal victories provided closure and justice. My parents, overwhelmed by multiple lawsuits and criminal investigations, eventually declared bankruptcy. The building that had been their weapon became a rehabilitated affordable housing complex under new management. Madison's divorce finalized with Brett receiving everything, including full custody. She worked retail, living in a small apartment, her Instagram dreams as dead as her fake pregnancy. But I took no pleasure in their downfall. If anything, their complete collapse reinforced the lesson that holding on to anger only poisons the person carrying it. I'd won everything, the lawsuits, the money, the freedom, yet victory felt hollow when I focused on their suffering. True healing came when I stopped checking on their situations, stopped caring about their consequences, stopped defining myself in opposition to their treatment. The scholarship fund grew, supporting a dozen students in its second year. I spoke at conferences about surviving family financial abuse, a topic more common than most realized. The emails from people sharing similar stories poured in, creating a community of survivors who understood that sometimes the family you're born into is just the starting point, not the destination. Grandmother's jewelry, recovered through legal action, sat in my safe largely unworn. The pieces were beautiful but carried complicated memories. I selected a simple pearl necklace she'd worn daily and donated the rest to the scholarship fund auction. Wearing those pearls reminded me that I came from somewhere, even if I couldn't stay there. Madison attempted contact once, a letter forwarded through Brett claiming she'd found religion and wanted to apologize. The pages were filled with subtle manipulation, blaming her actions on stress and my abandonment while suggesting that forgiveness required renewed contact. I filed it away unanswered. Forgiveness, I'd learned, was for my peace, not their absolution, and it certainly didn't require reopening doors better left closed. My parents made their own attempt through a lawyer, proposing a family healing session with a therapist they'd chosen. The obvious control tactic might have worked on the old Georgia, desperate for family approval. The new Georgia recognized it as another manipulation and declined through Diane. Some bridges, once burned, provided better service as ash than reconstruction. The extended family gradually sorted itself into those who understood and those who didn't. Cousin Janet, who'd risked her job to warn me, became a regular lunch companion. Uncle Richard's children reached out, admitting they'd seen their father's similar manipulations and appreciated my courage in resisting. But others remained convinced I'd overreacted, that family should forgive anything. I learned to be comfortable with their judgment, knowing they'd never walked in my frozen apartment or felt the weight of ultimatums disguised as love. 10 months after everything began, I hosted my first chosen family Thanksgiving. Brett brought the kids, Sophia brought her partner, Marcus, and his wife joined us, along with David and several scholarship recipients. We cooked together, laughed without edge, and created new traditions free from obligation or guilt. Emma helped me set the table, carefully placing each plate with serious concentration. Aunt Georgia, she said quietly, I'm thankful you showed me it's okay to say no. Those words, from an 8-year-old learning to protect herself, meant more than any legal victory or bank balance. This was why I'd fought, not just for my own freedom but to break the cycle, to show the next generation that love doesn't require self-destruction. As dinner wound down and the kids played while adults lingered over coffee, David raised a toast. To families we choose and boundaries we honor. To rising from ashes, Sophia added. To courage in the face of cruelty, Brett contributed. I raised my own glass, throat tight with emotion. To learning that sometimes the price of peace is the cost of letting go. We drank to that, this assembled group of survivors and supporters, proof that family isn't about blood but about who shows up when showing up matters. Outside my penthouse windows, the city glittered with possibility, and I knew with bone-deep certainty that I was exactly where I belonged. The family I'd lost had given me one last gift through their cruelty, they'd taught me to recognize and cherish real love when I found it. And surrounded by people who valued me for who I was rather than what I could provide, I understood that their rejection hadn't been my loss at all. It had been my liberation. Looking back, would I change anything? Would I pay the rent increase to avoid the drama? Would I take the nanny job to keep the peace? The old Georgia might have wavered, but the woman I'd become knew better. Every difficult choice, every boundary held, every bridge burned had led me here, to a life authentically mine. Some prices are too high to pay, even for family. Especially for family. Because the people who truly love you would never ask you to pay them in the first place. They'd celebrate your success, respect your choices, and love you not for what you could do for them but simply for existing. That's the lesson I carry forward, the wisdom earned through pain. Real love doesn't come with price tags or conditions. When someone shows you their true nature, believe them the first time. And sometimes, the family you're meant to have is the one you build yourself, one chosen person at a time. The Morrison family had threatened to raise my rent unless I became my sister's unpaid nanny. They didn't expect me to choose myself instead. They didn't expect consequences for their actions. Most of all, they didn't expect me to discover that losing them was the greatest gift they ever gave me. Because in losing them, I found myself. And that, as it turns out, was worth everything. If you've experienced family manipulation or financial abuse, you're not alone. Sometimes the hardest battles are fought at kitchen tables rather than boardrooms. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What boundaries have you had to set with family? How did you find the courage to choose yourself? Share your experiences and let's support each other, because chosen families start with connections like these. Please remember to like this video if it touched your heart, subscribe for more stories of triumph over adversity, and share this with anyone who needs to hear that it's okay to choose themselves, even when family disagrees. Thank you for joining me on this journey. May you find the strength to build the life you deserve, surrounded by people who love you without conditions. Until next time, remember. You are worthy of respect, your dreams matter, and sometimes the best family is the one you choose yourself.